Yes, so what I would like to talk about today comes from my experience from the past couple of years. Um, I work as a data analyst consultant currently, an independent one, but that's not where my journey started. I have reskilled for this field a couple of years ago in a reskilling course. And because it was something that I really enjoyed, some people took me on board, and I also started upskilling, reskilling other people, and that being either as a volunteer or also for business, so in-house building different courses for companies themselves, or delivering workshops that were meant as boot camps for others. So what I will talk about today comes from that experience. It's not something that is like one size fits all. It's really like set of thoughts, set of observations. So it's like take it or leave it, and maybe it inspires some of you to think about a bit further how to work around of like what makes our juniors happy. But before we really start, and it's starting to get a little odd, like speaking in front of the computer, not really seeing anyone, is I wanted to ask you, which I cannot currently, but it's the question that I always like ask myself or people that I talk to, is like, if you are a senior developer or senior data person in the company, or anyone that has to deal with tech, like who of you like had the great responsibility of hiring a junior person? Because that itself is a large thing to do. And then if you think about that, if you reflect on that experience and say, how many of you that actually hired the person, how many of these people are in that position a year or two later? Because if we look at data from the UK from the past couple of years, it seems that depending on which part of the tech industry you are in, it is very likely that 1 in 5 of the people that we hired, 1 to 2 in 5 of the people that we hired won't be in the position in a year after they started. So with that said, is IT actually is in the UK the second worst industry to be hiring for. And here I am quoting Financial Times report from early 2019, if I'm not mistaken. Is the second industry right after hotels and restaurants. So meaning it is an industry with very high proportion of hard to fill jobs. So they are open for a longer period than 2 or 3 months. And at the same time, the shortage of these skilled people could result in losing up to 140 billion pounds in the upcoming 2 years to our economy. That is an estimate. That Accenture did again about a year ago. Actually, it is 75% of companies in the UK experience challenges when it comes to recruitment in IT-related professions, and there is high chances that yours is amongst them as well. So with all that in mind, like what are all the brilliant ideas that companies are talking about or they are implementing to actually fill up those gaps? The highest proportion of them is hiring intern professionals with some like for temporary jobs where there is a shortage. But then obviously this is not a long-term solution because intern professionals are a scarce good as well, right? Second from the top of the list is increasing the workload across the current team, which is brilliant, but I don't know if any of you are or were in the position of people who are actually the ones getting the extra workload. Isn't very sustainable either. And the third from the top of the list is actually upskilling junior staff. to give them the tasks that could be offloaded from senior members. It is a very logical thing to do, but it brings lots of challenges into organizations that previously weren't hiring junior people at all, or they were hiring people who were coming as juniors from the IT industry. And that is a very different skill set that you might see when you bring people who reskilled or upskill. And that's where also my experience came in. In the past, I calculated today that I spent 250 hours delivering courses and workshops and teaching in past year only, in 2019. And that is one me, and it's not even my full-time job. So you can imagine that if this total jobs report that I was now quoting was from 2018, since then there's lots of organizations and companies who pop up who only deliver this, like upskilling people from other industries. So currently we are in a stage of the market in which there starts to be, and there's increasingly going to be people like that come out of a shorter period of time, 3, 6, 8 months, when they go through a program and they want to join the IT workforce. And it brings specific challenges, as I said, because it's not only for the organization itself, it's for the people, for the people that come into the company, because their struggles might not necessarily be technical ones, even though they are junior in their technical positions. I know this sounds strange, but after talking to some of the people that I have been reskilling in the past 2 years, and it's been more than 100 of them, definitely, like bringing them into the career. And I've questioned about 60 of them. Was number one reason or number one struggle that all of them named was that when they started their job as juniors, they were struggling to learn to actively make mistakes. The second one was that they learn to break down more complex problems. And only the third one was actually like navigating the tools and tech landscape in their company. So you see, people who come from the IT background very often are very intuitive in experimenting with the tech, very intuitive with breaking a bigger chunk into smaller pieces and start working with them. And this might be something that the people we are talking about might be struggling with. But that is just all part of a bigger skill set that such a new person needs to be building. And when I deliver courses, or when I teach, when I speak with people about upskilling for tech, for data, I usually say that it's the hard skill, it's also some sort of analytical thinking, and it's some soft skills. So it's like really a huge bucket of things that come together. So regardless of what the specific tools are that I'm showing over here, that can be very different for data, it can be very different for other areas, depending on what exactly is your domain. But nevertheless, like, it is a lot, right? So the real issue in all this is that since the bucket is large, it can create lots of overwhelm, and it creates lots of stress. And number one, no one likes stress in the first place. And second, and that's the more important part for us as people who are working with juniors, is that stress hinders learning, and it really severely limits our cognitive capacities. So meaning we are learning slower. It really is keeping our brains in more like a survival state. To to illustrate that, I wanted to show you this pyramid, which is a representation of something that is called Bloom's taxonomy. And now I am not an educational expert. It's just that helping people reskill is something that it's part of my job that I really, really enjoy. So I do look at the theoretical side of the things as well. This is more like a model that like I try to explain people. It's like when you're creating spaces for your new people, like this is why you should do it. So that's why we are looking at this pyramid now. So Bloom's taxonomy categorizes different functions of brains, function of learning and the way how we are perceiving into like based on its complexity. And basically what he is coming down to is saying the higher functions in the pyramid don't get executed unless in cases when parts of the brain that that are inhibited by stress don't function properly. So like when you're high level, when you do have, or when you experience higher level of stress, amygdala stops your brain for passing information over like higher up in the chain. And this is when only the lowest level of these pyramids are being executed. So when Bloom categorizes learning, he is saying that the first level of like how we learn and how we think of things is that we have to remember the things first, and then only we can develop something that he says could be characterized as understanding. So like putting a concept behind what we remember. Only then we are able to apply it, but by apply it, he means like literally like blind application. So when I learn that a variable can save number 3 and another variable can save number 2, and I can say a plus b, what does it equal to, is 5, doesn't mean that with this knowledge, the person will be able to abstract it to a problem that is on hand. So that is the application he's talking about. And then only when we can do this, we can start, wow, nice, that was, only when we can apply the things, we can start thinking about how to analyze them, how to break the different concepts into like categories, and how to slightly tweak them around. And only after that, we can also evaluate. So meaning like we have done this, we have written a plus b, and we get out the result of c. We are looking at, is this correct, or can we improve? As this could have been done different, could this have been done differently? And it is the last step before we are actually able to create new things. Meaning that is the moment when we take a known concept that we learn to apply, and we are able to use that concept on something that is completely unknown to us and fit it on there. So there are these 7 steps. And as I mentioned, is that when our brain is overwhelmed, we aren't able to progress up the pyramid because we are stuck with remembering and understanding, because the higher functions need more energy, and the energy is simply not sufficient. But now we have been talking about, or I've been talking about, what the junior people go through. But if you are a senior person who hits hiring, or is about to hire a junior, you have your struggles as well, right? So if you sit down at home for a minute and you think, what those struggles are, you might end up with lots of things, but these might be just short examples to it. So again, this is something, these are like little notes or like little memories from talking to people in the last 2 years, is that some of them are struggling to conceptualize for themselves. Like, how do I know what I already know? How do I conceptualize the knowledge? Like, how can I pass it over then? Because without me being able to grab, okay, what is it that I know? Like, what is so valuable about me that I now became as a guide to someone who is coming from outside and who knows less? So what is it? Like, what is it that actually makes the difference? This is tied to the second thing that I keep hearing quite a lot, and that is overcoming the 10,000 hours curse. Maybe you've heard this concept before. 10,000 hours supposedly, and now, give or take, but supposedly it's around the figure of hours, the number of hours that one needs to like truly, really master a skill. So again, regardless of whether it really is 10,000 hours or not, like you have maybe been coding for past 5, 6, 7 years, and making the leap back into understanding how is the, like, where is the other person versus where you are, might be quite a challenge. I've heard people, like really great people, saying that they are very insecure and that they are not sure that their knowledge is actually what is expected of them, and that they suffer with extreme imposter syndrome. Also, one thing lots of people mention, or some people mention, is that they are actually questioning or like asking themselves about their identity as a developer versus a highly skilled professional. Because, and now this is really important, is that once you come from a position in which you are supposed to only code, think of a solution to a given business problem and develop a technical solution to it, code it, whatnot, is a very different position than saying, okay, now I have someone here whom I have to partially also like think for, at least in the beginning of their journey. It is someone whom I need to manage their workload for. It is someone who, if they have an issue that requires solving within some business working groups, it's someone that I need to speak on behalf of, maybe. That is a very, very different role. So people then end up questioning themselves, saying, do I even have still the same value for my company as I did as a coder? And last but not least, there are people who do struggle with their own time, managing their own time and managing their own responsibilities, because some people end up in a situation in which, if this is mismanaged, they are technically taking over 2 jobs, like them still being coders, developers, and them being guides for another person. So sorry if the name of the workshop has misled you a bit, because this whole story isn't necessarily about making juniors happy only. It's about making the whole thing work for you and the junior hire. Because what is the worst thing that can happen is that we end up being one, clueless and stressed new hire, and second, an overwhelmed and stressed senior working with them. Or what's even a better constellation is It is a clueless and stressed new hire in overwhelmed and stressed senior in a very, very clueless organization. And that is also something that happens, and I've seen it happening, unfortunately, but it's something we will not talk about today because that's a topic of its own. Yeah, so to the actual observation or little framework that I have I've been observing that helps people regardless whether they realize it or not. Like with the companies that I've seen integrating new hires, junior hires successfully, I think lots of these elements that I'll mention were there in the process, like whether they knew it or not. However, as a disclaimer, it really is not, like, as I said, it's not one size fits all solution. It's not something that I would like to be, teaching and preaching. It really is like from set of observations. So what I've seen is that people who are telling themselves, okay, I work well, I'm learning and growing my toolkit, they went through like a journey that goes like outside of them, that is in the external environment, the out one, so like outer, and then part of the journey which is like sort of an inner, which is like inside in them, what they are thinking about. And each of these journeys have more or less like four phases. Even though they are fluid, it doesn't mean it happens one by one. It's just that they are there and that they're in a way fulfilled. So what I've seen with the people that I'm talking about, what I've seen around there, is that the people who were successfully integrated, or the people that were successfully integrating others into the work, are the ones that were giving or handing over individual responsibilities. It was that the role and the environment in which the new hire was challenging, but meaning not killing, challenging. It's giving something to think of. That these people did have stakeholder interaction. So they weren't just given a desk and here is your desk, here is your laptop. And these are written the tasks that you need to finish, because that creates lots of being cut off from what is the end result of the work. And last but not least, they often had some sort of a support system, which wasn't necessarily only their direct like superior senior person, but it might have been someone from either the same department or even someone else. Either someone within the department but not their direct coworker, or from another department, but someone who is assigned as a support system. This is how they learn. This is how they learn from the externalities around them. But then the people had the chance to go like also through their thinking process. Yeah, this whole external system was supporting this like internal growth in them, and that was like when they have some personal goals that are connected to the individual responsibilities. And now when I say personal goals, like people try to accuse me sometimes and say like, oh, it's always like this personal growth and and like 8 ways to be successful and so on. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Personal goals might be, I really want to learn, finish up my time to work, and I want to go home on time because ABC, because I need to recover, because I like sports after work, because kids are at home, whatnot. So you have a personal goal, and that is aligned with the responsibilities. And then you can reflect on the experience that is happening to you. So you have this challenging role and you can reflect on it. Afterwards, you have the space to understand your own skill set. And that was what I was talking about. Like some people some people wouldn't know what they know. And only when you know what you know and what you don't, or eventually what you don't know, is the moment when you can like reinvent yourself. And by reinvent yourself, I don't mean some like alternative thinking of like who we are or who we are not, but literally reinvent the way how you do things. So, and that is learning, right? To give a very specific examples here, so this is me, and what I'm going through is that I have a very clearly defined learning path. Okay, Jenny, this is what you should be able to do after 2 months. This is what you're going to learn in half a year. We expect that through your work you will learn this and that, and your projects will be sort of this and that, and having this like overview of like, okay, what can I expect? Second, as the second step can be like that the learning and their progress is made visible. Now, again, this doesn't have to be, you know, stickers on boards or whatnot, but sitting down really and saying, look, this is what you've done. This is how your work looked like. This is how your code looked like the first week you submitted something, and this is how it looks now. Look how much you change. I know this is something very simple, and that's the great thing about it, that it's really simple, but it can be very helpful. I think one element specific can be like rewarding experiments. So if I say that you interact with stakeholders, like, yeah. And last but not least is lots of groups of coworkers, teams, or companies, whatnot. They implement some sort of like mentoring or self-mentoring spaces, which again is not necessarily something very mainstream in our domain, but it is something that is very helpful when one is learning. And then what consequentially happens and I'll be real quick because time is running out, I think, and that's my last point anyways, is that through that what happens is that you start understanding the learning curve concepts, and you might be able to conceptualize your own technical knowledge, then understand your value beyond tech skills, and you might be able to learn to let go and trust others' judgment. Now, I mentioned that it's about the junior and the senior, like the senior person as well. So this whole journey, this is what's happening on both of the levels, right? So while your junior might be learning to become a more independent coder, you are learning to work with the others so that they become independent, and that is a hard skill as well, you want it or not, in a way. So this is the journey that you go through and they go through as well, and yeah, this is a way how I think that's quite easy to like think, this is what I can set up to maximize the chances that things are going to go well with this. Again, it's not universal. It's something that I've seen that different organizations and teams had the chance to do, either like with them knowing or not. Last remark for the end. A dear friend of mine, James, told me once, it only took me 3 times to make it right. And I would say, as much as I like James, it's like, don't be like James. Try to make it the first time right, because yeah, it's people, right? Once again, thank you. Thank you for listening, for being here. I'll be happy for questions. If you want to connect with me, you can through LinkedIn, or I'm on Instagram as well. I'm not a big Instagrammer person, but nevertheless, definitely LinkedIn, I'm active there. So you can catch up.
Okay, well, thank you, Barbara. I'm gonna unmute everybody so we can show our appreciation for the. So let's see if this works. Let's have a round of applause. Get that. Amazing. Great. So thanks, Barbara. That was excellent. We will swap now over to Slido. I've put some questions, like just some seed questions up on there. Is that going to work? So Chris, I don't know if you want to curate some of the questions that come through on Slido. I've just put a couple up just as a starter for 10.
Yeah, I was going to add one myself, but I can't quite figure out. Oh, 16968. Yeah, let's give everyone 2 or 3 minutes to actually add some questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was thinking we could just do a start for 10 while people are thinking of their questions, just so they can think while.
Yeah, okay. I mean, Nick Hemley's submitted a couple of questions that look quite interesting. So, Barbara, do you think that most organisations identify as a learning organisation?
Sorry, folks, I wasn't here for a second in case.
Ah, sorry.
No worry.
It dropped, so.
So yeah, at random, I've chosen the bottom question. Do you think that most organisations identify as a learning organisation?
Oh, wow, that's a very, very, very broad question, and so I will talk about the organizations that I have come across. Okay. And I see something that I would call, with very, like, in the very loose understanding of it, as a correlation between like the size of the company or the organization. The thing is that the larger the organization is, of course, the harder it is to push these things through. But then the more likely it is that what we call sort of like learning organization emerges in like little clusters of people. So I was, for example, working with a bank last year, and you could see large difference between people who were coming for courses and workshops from different departments. Some of them were very, very much into like, okay, this is the change we are making here. We are trying to digitalize these sort of skills, is something we want. This is going to help us with our work. We are going to change the modus operandi of ourselves, of the organization, and we just need to tweak around it. While as others were obviously like very, very close to it, and they took it as just another event to spend a day out of their desk. Now, I don't know what the reason for those things are. What I'm saying is just this observation, like when you have a small organization, and that's with any, like, so learning organization effectively, I think, is like, that's a culture, right? That's the thing of culture. Driving a culture in a small organization is always easier than a big one. And that's, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Okay. So we're not getting a torrent of questions, but we've got a couple. So that, right, we've got two that aren't submitted by the organisers. Yeah, and please feel free to upvote, everyone. You can do that, and I'll take the top one. So the top one currently now has 2 votes. Do you have any recommendations for how best to approach those first few days of integrating junior devs to the team?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't necessarily want to give recommendations, because everyone's situation is a bit specific. So it can be very different for even each team, not just institution, right? But I have seen people, for example, preparing downscaled situations that they have solved, or like problems they have solved within past couple of months, and like downsizing or taking chunks from there, and preparing that as something which was like a little warm up for the people before they joined like an actual project, or actual like started working on something real. And that is the case. That the thing is that they might be able to understand the way how you are approaching problems before they get the hands on actual code, when it might be a lot more stress from them being like, oh, now I make a mistake. But like prepare some sort of a transition period for them. What I do find very important though, when I said that there is lots of people who aren't in the position a year after they were hired, it's like we are all aware that these first days are very often very crucial for that, whether that first day is going to work, first year is actually going to work out or not, is to really do have something for them to do. Yeah, companies very often do hire the people, and then laptop arrives the day 6, first access through systems comes day 10. 2 weeks later, they are not allowed to install something else necessary for their work, and that's crazy. Like yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you. I think, well, we've got another question here about purposely reduced scope. I think you answered that, so I'm going to move on, I think, to a quick break, and then Warren's talk. So thank you very much, Barbara. That was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and like if this is a topic that people are interested in, as I said, like connect with me on LinkedIn. We can, sit down, chat down, like over a coffee, no strings attached, because this is really something I like. So we'll be happy to.
Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, back in 5, I think.